Look at that plastic goodness. Need snips. Scissors will work. Fuck clamshells. Brooklyn, I'm going out with Lisa to patrol the city. You shall wait here and protect the clan.
Yeah, no problem, Goliath. I'll just be cool. Yeah, crawling around, surveying the city. I'm a real gargoyle.
Whoa, what? Don't film me when I'm playing with my toys! I like toys. Welcome back to Taylor Animates for another week straight and is tired. Did I mention in the last video why I chose not to pursue this as a full-time career? I did. That's why I'm saying it again. It's a lot. This week we're continuing from where we left off last week. Hi, Quoth. Let me know when you're done. Okay, this week we're continuing where we left off last week. We were doing the second animation. Spoiler, and I don't feel bad, even though I do feel bad. This is why I'm saying it. But I don't feel bad, so no shame. But I didn't finish it. My goal this week was to finish the secondary animation and finish the intro, so the entire thing was completed. That was an unrealistic task for myself, or I would have needed another day. I spent probably 4 days straight working on the animation. A lot of work. It was exhausting, to be frank. But it is at a point where I feel that it's done enough for the sake of the video. So we won't really be focusing on the final intro itself. The next video I make, fingers crossed, we'll just have that incorporated, but we'll be pretty close. We'll also going to be, I suppose I should say, this is part 2. If you didn't see part 1, go check it out. I'll have it in the link down below. Some of this, it'll make sense without that video, but it's going to give you a lot more context, and I think it'll be a more complete story and hopefully in-depth discussion between the differences between the two animations and how the whole intro has come together, at least to the point where it is in this video. But yeah, so in this one, as I promised in the last one, we are going to be touching on Keynote. I'm going to be showing you a breakdown of how some of those elements work. I'll also go a little bit more in depth into Procreate itself and show you some of the layers, things like that. We're going to go straight into those quick 2 videos right after this intro. Then we'll get into the time lapse, the full discussion. I have better footage this time of in progress animations at actual frame rates at the actual speed outside of the time lapse, so you can see those clearly as we progress through. We'll talk about the differences between the 2 styles of animation, because this one is a little bit different from the last one to some respect. But yeah, I hope you like it. This is almost done, and I'm excited to say that. So should we just jump into the video then? Okay, have fun. See you later. Bye. All right, everybody, what's going on? So we're going to start this one by showing you a bit of Procreate internally. I wanted to give a little more context in this video. As I mentioned in the true intro, not the skit in the beginning, but I didn't actually finish this entire piece. That's okay though, I feel fine with that, because this was an arduous process, to say the least, to get it to this point, and it gets to the point where the full idea is visible, you know what I mean? The intro itself will be shown at a later date. This is more specifically showing the animation, how the animation process works, maybe in more detail. what I wanted to show in Procreate was a little bit more that I didn't get to show in the first video. And this is going to show kind of how it looks internally when you're using it, and maybe give a little bit more context for how the different screens or settings appear. So it shows maybe more of my process of how it really works, as opposed to just you watching the time lapse of the lines being drawn. So at the bottom, you can see there's a playhead. And if I go and cycle through, I can play each cell or frame individually of the animation. I can manually scroll through it, slide through it, and scroll through it. You know, I combine words sometimes. And in the background, you can see the onion layers, you know, the frames that are going to be displayed before or after. I can add a frame if I wanted to. I click the add a frame there. I could play it, and then I'll actually just cycle through it. I can pause it anytime. In the settings, I can cause it to loop, where it goes through and does it multiple times. I could ping pong, where it goes forward and backwards. Here is where I change the frames per second. So I talked about this before, but just for a reference so you can see it, I'm going to put it at 4 and then play through the whole animation. And you can see how it's much more stuttery, right? It really slows down. And this kind of gives you an idea of what I was talking about in the first video, where I decided 8 frames. If I wanted to look good at 4 frames, I would have to add a lot more frames in between. Because right now it just looks too jittery, unless you're going for like a Into the Spider-Verse kind of scenario, but even this is too slow for that. For the same sake of reference, let's go ahead and put it at 12. Oops, that's 13. Doesn't want to work. There we go. And let's go to the beginning. And let's play that. You can see it's way more sped up, right? And if I wanted that to look smooth, again, we're dealing with frame issues here, right? Where I've drawn mine to work in conjunction with the frames that I generated. So it's going to look a little bit strange at these sped up intervals, but just for sake of reference. But yeah, we run this at 8. I can choose the opacity of the onion skin in the background. So I can, if you look at his goatee there, maybe let's go to a cell. There you go. You can make it totally off. You can make it slightly visible. I like to stay maybe around 50%. And then, yeah, you can choose how many skins. So I can show multiple here. I can show just 1 or 2. I like to do 1. And then another thing that's relatively important is if I slide through here, and I believe it'll show me at the bottom at one point. So this frame for a second. Something that I like to do, and it's going to show more weight, is you can decide how long each frame is going to be held. So if I want it to read in a certain way, for example, like when he turns his head, it's going to go quick. If I put this, for the sake of exaggeration, I'm not going to leave it at 6, but I can have it choose to hold on that frame for 6 seconds to give more impact to that specific look. See how long he stares at you before turning? Once it cycles through again, we'll show it one more time here. That long pause. And that's what we can do. And once you do that, you can see at the bottom these layers are darkened out. And that's to show that that one exact frame has been held for a significant amount of time. And that can give a pause in between the different animations that you're doing, or the different, I guess, motions that the character is portraying. And then I wanted to show the grouping on the side as well. So this is your layers. If I click this top right, what I can do is I can scroll through all my layers. You can see there's a lot. I think there's like 61 or 62. How this is constructed is in layers, like I said in the last one. I did it in groups this time because I learned I could do that. So in the last video, everything was these individual layers, right? You can see here's a head, here's a body. I can turn off the body. I can turn off the head. When I originally sculpted this, drew this, I did it all in line work. Then I did a layer that was below this with just color, and then I was able to color it without having to deal with the line work. The first time I did this, I didn't know I could animate in groups, and it made it more difficult. It took a lot more time, so I was able to speed that process up. So I wanted to show that. But you can see here how I can still turn individual things off, and that's essentially how this whole thing gets constructed. And then as I went, I merged some layers down to just get it down to basically 2 layers per group, which when you're thinking about it, like I said, there's like 60 something frames, and basically that's doubling the frame, so it's like 120 because it's got to play 2 at a time versus 1. But yeah, this is the general thing I wanted to show. Just give you a bit of context about how this really comes together, how I have the tools to cycle through the animation, how the grouping of the layers works. I wanted to show this before we delved into the video, so you have this in mind as we go forward. But yeah, that's it. So I hope you found this useful, and we will get back to the rest of the video. So this video is not really going to show much further in Keynote than what we showed last time as far as progression of the full intro. However, that being said, redundancy at its finest. However, I do want to elaborate on what I showed last time to give more context about how the full intro comes together. So I guess first things first is I'm going to play this and just let you watch it because it'll be a little bit better quality, I believe, than I showed in the last video. So let's just play the animation of the intro and how it works, right? So we have the goat walking in. He is hoofing it. He is pulling the word goat behind him. How fun. Once he gets to a point, he slows down, which would be the change for the next animation. Then he pulls out. And then the V comes in. And finished by the sheepish. And then we do a screen wipe. We do a screen wipe to give the logo reveal and then kind of end it there. Again, this isn't finished, this is in progress, but I want to share some more context behind the scenes of how this actually works so you get maybe a better understanding. So as you can see, this is the main, the window where Keynote is, right? We have a display, in the middle here. Okay, it froze on me after I played the intro, but we're back. So again, this is the main display. Here you can see the window in which the actual scene takes place. So to be zoomed in, I'm further out so you can see some more things going on. To the side over here, we actually have the video file of the animation of the goat. We have the word goat here. That's the last scene. It's just kind of showing one of the last scenes that happen. Up here we have sheepish, and then the is all the way at the top. So how this works, if I go to build order, we'll get a pop-up window here. And this is the order of everything I had to manually input to get this to happen. So we have video start, that's right here. And what this is telling you, the order of operations, right? So first we start the video. Second, we do a move command. It starts here, it goes here and here. We do everything from how long it's going to take for it to move. We can do an acceleration if it speeds up, slows down at the start or the beginning, if it keeps the same pace. So that's kind of how it starts. Start the video. We then tell it to move. We then move this rectangle, which is just off screen behind this, and we have to match the duration and the speed essentially so it lines up with goat so that it looks somewhat believable. That was a little bit finicky in order to work. Perhaps there's a better way, but I didn't figure it out. Once we get there, then we tell the movie to go again, to move over, and then we tell the rectangle to go again, to move over. Now, in between these moving points, between, I guess, 3 and 4, is where we would then insert the secondary animation, which we're working on in this video. But it's not here yet. Again, this is a work in progress. So this is, again, just a kind of a sped up version so you can see what's happening. We then go to the H. We tell how long it's going to move. We position exactly where we want it up top. We tell it where it's going to end. So it falls in, the T falls in, the E falls in. We put a rotation on the E so that it falls at this weird angle. We change the duration of how all these fall so that they can fall at different speeds. Then we have sheepish come in. We apply a bounce to sheepish so it looks kind of cute when it hits. We actually have a oval appear, which it's invisible, but the oval is what creates that sparkle effect that you saw earlier. As the oval appears, the true actual word goat appears because we're getting rid of the movie version that, if I scroll back up, I think it shows it slightly, but the movie version that has the dirt and has the rope, we wipe that out, so it just gives more of a logo. And then we do the sparkle effect, and then we get rid of the rectangle entirely, and then we turn off the movie. So like all of those things happen in succession, and that's what gives us our full intro that we have right now. It's a lot of finicky movements. I mean, even, so much as the the format, if I go to the side of, like if I click the word, goat, right? And I go to text. So, you know, I've downloaded custom fonts for this, right? I've got the size to be the exact right size of fonts. I've hand selected the colors. I've hand selected the spacing in between the letters, the kerning. You know, I've done a lot of stuff to make this look exactly how I want it to look, that I'm not super going to go into detail here, but all of that is relevant. I mean, even the size of this font goat versus the versus the size of the word goat in the animation, I had to try to get those to line up. And guess what? The scaling of fonts between Procreate and Keynote is not the same. You know, in Procreate, I think it was like, you know, 100% or something to get it. That's as large as I could get that word goat. In Keynote, this is like 500% or something. So it's like I had to try to line those up, get them all to work. But again, this is to show you some examples of what's happening. I guess the other quick thing to show real fast is you can see here, this says with build 12, right? Some are after builds. So some things happen simultaneously with other actions, some things happen afterwards. Again, this is all learning. I had no idea how to do this, but again, I wanted to give more context of how the full final intro comes together. And since I'm not going to show any further of it in this video, like I said, I'm not going to work on this further in this video. This video is primarily about the animation, but I wanted to give more context on how that really looks because I didn't get to do it the first time around. And since this is a part 2, you deserve to see it. So yeah, I hope that was clear. And yeah, let's get going with the rest of the video. All right, let's get into this bad boy, shall we? So first things first is we are animating, as I said. So we're doing with the original base blockout of this animation. We're going through, we're doing the very rough outlines of the character's form, so that way we can get the most exaggerated expression. If we dive too quickly into details, we might lose some of that expression. So I started with kind of a base round circle for the skull. I started with kind of a protruding square. It was a little bit rounded, or rectangle, to get the snout or muzzle. And then we did the neck. And again, we're just working through the base framework of that. I guess before we get into how this animation is different, I'll just talk about what I wanted this animation to be specifically. So what this is, and you saw the teaser earlier, so you know how it's going to look in the end, but I wanted to give you that early so you had it in mind as we went through the video. So maybe I'm doing myself a disservice, but hopefully the process you enjoy. That's what the channel's about. What we wanted to do is we wanted the goat to be coming across the flower. He sniffs the flower. He eats the flower, looks to the camera, and baas. Now, through that process, we found ways of making that a very expressive animation, and I guess now we can get into that, right? So the first animation was very, very repetitious. You know, it's just a walk cycle. He's going to repeat that over and over again. We talked about that in the first video. But the fine-tuning of that didn't give me a lot of room for expression as far as how the goat acted. It didn't give a lot of character to the goat. For example, here's the first full blockout. I have a few of these throughout. It should repeat about 3 times, but here you can see it in real time what we have so far. So I knew when I did this one, I wanted to have much more characterization inside the goat's animation. I wanted him to feel more like a character, more distinct. So what I decided to do is I started to draw more on classic cartoons, at least from my own memory bank. I didn't look up anything, obviously. Or maybe not obviously, but I didn't look up anything. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have him bite that flower, but instead of just biting the flower, I wanted big swings and windups, right? We get to the full arc of that expression. When he goes down, he goes all the way over, all the way up, and it gives a nice swing of momentum. When he chews it, it kind of gets stuck in his throat, so he does an extendo neck, kind of, it's like springy, and then it bounces all around. I mean, that was very heavily old cartoon based, but I wanted it to be hyper stylized because I wanted that expression, I wanted that caricature. Even when he, baas at the end, and his little uvula in the back of his throat is like, ticka 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 ticka, kind of reminds me of like a cowbell or something. I had like the mental image of like Steamboat Willie when I was doing some of this, the old Mickey Mouse cartoon. So that was kind of some of the original expression here. or intent, I guess, behind it. As we're doing here, so we've gone through the initial rough out. Now we're doing the really tedious part, which is the part that takes the longest. But we're taking that framework and we're comparing it to the original head of the goat that I sculpted. And I'd only done one head sculpt of the goat. You know, the body changed around a lot, his legs moved a lot, but his head was always stationary in the first animation. So figuring out how his head worked in a 3D plane took a long time. These are roughs, they'll be finalized, they'll be more on model, as you would say, as we go forward, which means that they'll just be more matching, more uniform to a set character. But we're going through, we're doing roughs, right? We're taking that round head shape, putting his skull into it, putting his full muzzle, his nose, his horns, his ears, and we're putting those through each individual frame. Again, it's exaggerated here. That last frame you saw, he kind of almost looked like a donkey. It reminded me of like Pinocchio. But that's okay. Some of these frames are going so fast when they're playing that you're only seeing the split-second detail of it. You know, sometimes it's more about the motion, right? Like, I really wanted to emphasize not only the characteristics of the goat, right? His expression, his personality, but I wanted to very much accentuate the movement, have a lot of fluidity, have a lot of speed. That was all the goal here. Again, this is new for me. I've never done this before, but I've researched it a lot or watched a lot of videos on it, and if I'm good at anything, I'm good at interpolating information visually. So if I watch something enough times, I'll usually be able to pick up how it works, and I can incorporate that into whatever I'm doing. Not always flawlessly, but I think overall that is one of my strengths that I've always been able to do. So I took what I'd seen in the past and I tried to put that into my own work here. Again, so fluidity, movement, right? Some of these will remain kind of off model, as I was saying. You know, some of these expressions are very exaggerated. And what we were doing in those moments is we were looking to, right, as Quoth said, we were looking to just be obnoxious. You know, as we do. But the ears, for example, they get really stretchy. They'll look extremely long, or his beard will really be exaggerated. Here we have the first full rough out of the whole entire animation, right? So this is everything we've done so far up to this point. It's still really rough, but now we have a distinct goat, quote-unquote, head for every frame. Well, halfway, I suppose. This only goes up to the chewing. We'll have another one further that shows the full thing. But you can see, like, the beard is still stiff, right? When he's moving, it might stay forward. As we progress, the beard will flow in the wind. So if his head goes forward, the beard falls backwards. If his head goes back, the beard goes forward. Same with the ears, right? They'll flop around as we progress, and they'll be bouncy. They'll be really stretchy. You know, there's even certain frames here where his head goes up, and I'll have one or two beards below that. And that's to help accentuate that movement, right? It lets your eye guide between those two frames, and it automatically interpolates that data as additional frames. It's just a trick that you can do with animation. I'm talking a lot. Coffee sip. If you're drinking coffee, let me know. We do that on this channel. I'm going to say it because there's not a lot of people who have probably seen me. So if this is your first time seeing me, hi, welcome. Hope you're enjoying the video. But we drink coffee. Energy is okay. Yes, Quoth, I agree. Coffee is the best. My cat talks in every video, so enjoy that as well. Yeah, but hello, friend. Why don't you come on down here? Cool. But yeah, here we go. We have the full. Yeah, this goes through the springy neck, so this isn't even all the way done yet, but this takes you through the entire springy neck. One of the benefits I had with this animation is there are repeated frames here or there, as far as like the head's look. So like you might see you might notice a point where his head's kind of down, and it'll be down in a similar point later. So I'll be able to reuse that head. And I was intentionally trying to be smart about that, right? And saving myself time. This entire animation is already 60-something frames. So if I had to draw a unique head every single time a rough of it, I guess the secondary or the initial draft, and then the final render, and then plus color. Yeah, no thanks. So I try to save myself time where I could. But, so there's repeated frames. And then like the stretchy head part, right? Even though his head's bouncing all around, I decided to keep that one specific head because it was more about the movement of the head as it bounced around in the bobbly form than it was about capturing his expression in that moment, right? He was supposed to look stiff as the neck was like a spring. So I hope that translates, and hope that explains why I didn't decide to do custom heads for that movement, where I did for everything else. Yeah, I'm sure there was other points I was making that I've now forgotten before Quoth interrupted me. Yeah, it's your fault. You did this. You're the problem. Here we're trying to add the flower now. We're going to start incorporating that into the animation because we hadn't to this point. We're just focusing on the head and neck. So he does bite it. It will snap off, and then he'll chew it up. We'll incorporate that into the animation as we progress here. But that is what's happening at the moment. Yep, working on the working on the flower animation. I've started it with, I did a blowback, but I realized that wasn't translating enough, and it might happen after this, but I'll talk about it now because a lot happens in a quick amount of time. But as I watched it, I noticed that it was too snappy. It needed a secondary frame to ease. So as we watch it here, let's see if we've done it already or not. It should repeat in a second. Yeah, you see how it's So generally you're going to have ease-ins and ease-outs for any kind of movement. I knew because he was going to be blowing out air as he was sniffing that flower, I wanted the first frame to be fast, but as it came back, I wanted a frame to play with where it went past the initial point and moved just a hair forward, and it moved just a hair forward. And that ease helped a lot in making that animation look better. And I could have added more. I could have added more frames to smooth that, but I didn't think it was necessary. It would have just cost me more time, and it's really about economy of time with this. Animation in general is an economy of lines. Often when you're designing a character, you're working with, kind of how few of lines can I add to something so that it looks good, it reads as a true thing, but maybe it's not going to kill me in the process to reestablish those lines for every single frame, every single animation. So sometimes you're making things look more simplistic than you would if you were doing a full drawing. Now, if you have a really good animation team, or it's a personal project and it's not a huge animation, maybe you will go hyper detailed. But sometimes it's good to be more simple. And I think in general, I could have made the goat more simple, even when it comes down to like his colors and stuff. But yeah, I tend to go for quality over I guess my own sanity. So I decided to forgo that to some extent. I wanted enough detail where I was happy about it. Because again, this will be in pretty much every video going forward, and I wanted to be something that I enjoyed looking at and didn't like cringe at it because it was dog shit. Which, we might still do in the end, but there was efforts made. Something I was going to talk about before Quoth interrupted me is squash and stretch. If you've watched anything about animation, that's like, I'm not going to say it's like the basic principles or step one, because I've never watched like a tutorial or taken an animation class, or I can't speak to it in a scholarly or collegiate level. I can speak to it from, hey, I hear this a lot, so I'm going to talk about it now. Squash and stretch are things that come up very, very frequently. Here we are, by the way. This is what I'm going to call the final roughs, if I am correct. Yeah, I believe so. From here, we'll go and we'll take every single drawing we've done and we'll clean it up. You can see there's a lot of sketchy lines around there. And sorry, my face is covered in hair because Quoth walked all over me and got on my hands. And yay for us, we didn't have enough hair to deal with before. Anyway, squash and stretch. Squash and stretch. Watch me struggle to pull hair off of my face. You might be wondering, hey, he already has a mustache. It's not the same, okay? When you get these little fuzzy cat hairs inside of it, it's the worst. So squash and stretch, what that means is that let's take this cloth that I use, microfiber cloth, to clean my screen, right? As it moves, you can see it's a solid object, right? You can see it as it moves left and right. It doesn't change. However, if you're wanting to exaggerate a movement, what you can do is you can, as it moves, we can say it extends, right? Now it extends. Maybe it starts here, it stretches down, then it shrinks back up, and stretches down, and it shrinks back up. If you think of like a ball dribbling or something, often when it hits the ground in animation, it might compress quite a lot. And then when it goes up, it's going to go hyper long, and then it'll return to its base form. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. I tried to keep a similar idea with not a lot in the goat's face. There are certain scenes where he's got a very exaggerated like lift up, and I've kind of extended his face a little bit. I definitely still tried to keep it within proportion. But as I mentioned, with his ears and his beard in particular, I put a lot of emphasis on exaggerating those movements or those parts of his body to help exaggerate the movement. Make it feel more better, you know? And with that, let's coffee again. If you know what this mug is from, let me know. And if you don't, sucks to be you. All right. So here we're going through, we are, like I said, we're cleaning up the individual frames quite a lot. And I think you can tell that as we go through. The character definitely starts to get much more on model. We really try to rework a lot of these frames so it kind of feels more correct with the framework of the goat. Excuse me, Quoth, we're filming. Thank you. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. You'll see we'll move around the ears a lot. We'll redraw the horns, redraw those ridges on the horns, even though we just put them all in place. Play with his nose and his eye details and all of that stuff. It definitely moves around a lot, and we're also very much considering ensuring that the neck lines up with a similar point each time. As you can tell, we don't have the body incorporated yet, which we do by the end of this. But we're trying to make sure that the upper line and the bottom line of the neck are meeting a similar point, so the neck looks kind of believable that it's coming from a specific origin. That way, when we add the body, it's much easier for ourselves. We have to do less adjustment. I guess speaking of adding the body, that'll be coming up shortly. To start this, in my previous animation where I just did the walk cycle, we didn't have a single shot where his legs were just fully straight, all four on the ground in like a standard standing, position, like bracing himself while he's eating or something. So we did do that. We took a body shot from the previous animation, and then I just copied the legs, because, as he's walking, eventually all legs will be on the ground in a different cell. So I took it and then I copied the legs where he would be standing from different frames from that animation, merged them together into a standing pose. Use that here. So we do incorporate that body. We will blend the neck. We do some body movements, not a crazy amount, but enough to make it feel believable. If I wanted to, I could definitely do more with maybe him breathing, have more tail movement probably, but I think I'm happy with it where it is. It's enough where it doesn't feel detached from the head by the end of this. It definitely feels like it's still part of a character. At least I think enough for my purposes that I'm happy with. But let me know. If any of this is, you think I could have done more, you think I could have done less to make it, to make it sell. Or if you like how this came out, I'd love to know. I'd really love any feedback or opinions. Like I said, I don't animate. Not much, definitely not to this level. So I'd be curious to hear any opinions, even if it's, what you would consider elementary or minor, because maybe you're not an artist or you don't animate. But I would love to know. Again, these videos aren't necessarily meant to be for people who do art at least not exclusively. I want this to be about the process in general. That's why I like to do a lot of different styles of art on the channel itself. I like it to be, I like to use art as the vehicle, right? I like the channel to be kind of a free flow expression of creative ideas. And I want the channel to be the discussion of how that comes to be. In my typical life, I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about my art. I just don't. It's easy for people to think of it as something that you do as opposed to really a part of who you are. And for me, art has always kind of been a part of who I am. And, like I said, the exact style of art has changed a lot from drawing to acting. It's been all over the place. But art has always been a big part of me. And I think it's easy for some people to underestimate the value you place in that, or it's at least easy for some people to not maybe invest with it or ask you maybe as many questions as you would hope for, considering how much time goes into something like this. And I think it necessarily doesn't come from a point of disinterest or a lack of caring, but I think sometimes for people who aren't artists, it's hard for them to relate, right? They may not even know what to say other than, oh, that's cool, that looks nice. But for someone who spends, this entire animation, both parts, turns out to be like 50 hours or something. It's going to be longer than that by the end, because again, we're not finished with this. But when you spend this long on a project, this many days, this many hours, this much grinding, sweating for that thing that you care about, it might just leave you dissatisfied sometimes. So that's not to throw shade or anything like that, but it's just to have an open conversation and to express why this channel is extremely important for me in just a short amount of time, because it gives me an avenue to show off the things I care about and hopefully show them in a way that is enlightening to people who don't do it. So they have an understanding of what goes into it. So they have an understanding of how it works, to maybe give more, more of a framework for them to be able to ask questions or speak about it, or maybe just appreciate it more. I think that's it. But here we go. This is the final cleaned up. Every single frame is where we want it. All the line work is done. If you hyper look at some of the details, like when his head is bouncing around, you'll find some scraggly lines that we didn't clean up. But again, because his head moves around so fast, it's not a clean motion. I was like, yeah, I think it's okay. And when we throw color on it, it's even less noticeable. So again, it's about realizing where that time is best spent and knowing that, yeah, that was good enough. I didn't have to clean it up beyond that point because it looked good and I was happy with it. But now we're adding color. I suppose I should say how this animation isn't done. By the end of it, it'll be fully colored. We're going through here, we're making sure the neck seam lines up correctly with the body. We're adjusting the collar as needed, so if the head moves too much, we will skew the collar to, again, make it feel believable so it doesn't look like a rock and like a worm wiggling around. The rope hasn't been touched at all. I need to do that still. Likely for this animation, we'll just have it real limp, like drooping really low. It won't really move, which will be nice, but I'll have to go through and clean that up. And then where the collar meets the neck, not the round back part, but kind of the top and the bottom, there are some sections where you might notice where it's not colored in and there might be a slight gap. I haven't cleaned that up. I focus solely on getting the whole color applied to all of the frames of the face, all the frames of the flower, and ensuring that the neck, as it met the base curve of the collar, was totally clean. And there were a few frames, like I said, where I bobbed his body around, bobbed the tail around. I moved his leg at one point because I thought it would give a little bit more emphasis to the movement, again, make him feel more like a character versus just a neck and a head moving. So yeah, that kind of got us where we're at. But yeah, as I said, we're just going through now and we are applying color to everything. Again, I did this in a way that was much smarter than I did the first animation, because I had learned in the first animation how this process could be streamlined with grouping. Like I said, I made groups of, I used groups to animate versus just singular layers, which means that applying my color to these individual line work cells or layers was much easier, because again, this doesn't have the standard animation layers like you would in, you know, other animating software. It's not quite the same effect in Procreate. You can achieve the same type of goal, but perhaps in a different way. And I didn't look to see if you can extend that or not. Yeah, I'm sure you probably could. But in Procreate for this animation, it was hard capped at 181 layers, and I met all of those. I got to 181 layers, and I would have been way past that. But it wouldn't let me make more layers at a point. So like I got through almost every single head where I had colored it. There was a few left, and I couldn't color anymore. I was like, oh shit. So I had to start merging the color layer with the actual line work of the head. I was hoping to keep those all separate. And again, maybe it's an easy adjustment. I assume it's probably hard-coded into the canvas, so I may have had to select that at the beginning, or maybe it wouldn't even let you go past that. I don't know. I'd have to look at it. But like I said, I had spent about 4 days on this. I had finished this last night, finished it to a point I was happy with at like 10:30. So I knew I didn't want to spend any more time on it. Let's say that much. And I was like, fuck it. I'm not even going to look it up. I'm just going to take the quickest route to get to the end, and that's what I did. So, we got there. Again, maybe it's not as editable or easy to change in the future if I really want to, but I wanted to get it done. And again, it's pretty close to being done. So I was happy with that. But yeah, we're right at the end. In just a minute, we're going to get into the live playthrough of this animation. Yeah, I didn't say that earlier, but that little snap, that little spark of like a star looking thing, I liked how that turned out. It's so simple, and it's probably too cartoony. It's too much of a flash, but I like it. I think it helps exaggerate that pulling and the breaking of that flower as he eats it. But yeah, so again, I won't show the I don't think I'll do another video on this, because I think 2 is going to be good, but I will be finishing this after this video. I'll be going through and resolving this animation entirety, and then I will throw it into Keynote, finish the introduction, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, as long as I'm not too burnt out on animating, but I tell you, I'm right there. Hopefully the next video I make, this will be in the actual video, fully completed, and that'll be a nice feeling. So yeah, this is the animation. Is just on repeat right now to show you what this entire animation looks like. Just, part 2, not the walk cycle. But yeah, I hope you really enjoyed it. As much as I complain about animation being tedious, and I'm sorry if these videos, these last 2 have felt exasperated. But as much as I complain, I love it, and I think it's really great, and I'm happy to be able to flex these muscles every once in a while. I'm happy to put different things on the channel that hopefully people can find interesting. So yeah, if you did, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Obligatory like, comment, subscribe as always. If you did like it, there'll be more videos coming before too long. And yeah, until next time. See you then.